Hello artists, this is Mr. David. In today's lesson, we are going to be creating some art using gradient washes. A gradient wash is when your paint goes from light to dark, or dark to light, and transparency. Transparency is when we let the paper show through, which we will often use in watercolor painting. We'll also use glazing, which is when we paint a thin layer of paint over an already dry layer of paint. First, we have to prepare our paper. We are going to cut our special watercoloring paper in half. I've decided to measure mine, and then cut it with scissors. I measure exactly 4.5 inches to the center with my ruler in 2 spots. I connect my dots with the side of my ruler and draw a straight line. I then cut my paper in half along the line. Now, I'm going to tape down my watercolor paper horizontally or sideways. I'll use the other half of my paper to test my paint on. I've got one that I've used before, so I'll use that so I don't waste paper. We should keep all of our scraps since we can use them to test out our paint. Let's tape down our paper. We will create borders using the tape we've already stuck on our clothes so it's not so sticky. That way, it won't rip our paper when we peel it off. Create an even border when you go around. Press down your tape so the paint won't go underneath. For this art piece, I'm going to use just the color purple. As in most watercoloring, we only need a very small amount of paint. So wet your brush and mix a little amount on your palette. For this one, we're going to paint a super thin and transparent amount of paint. Test it a bit on your paper to check how light it is. By only using very little paint, we make it transparent, so a lot of the paper shows through. First, we'll draw a jagged line with the tip of our brush. Then start adding a little more paint. We are using our wet on dry technique, painting wet paint on dry paper. If you need more water or paint, keep adding some, so the edge of what you are painting stays wet. Use the side of your brush to pull the paint down and cover a bigger area using just water. This will create a gradation, color that goes from dark to light or more transparent. Now we can set it aside to dry. Remember, watercoloring takes patience, a little painting, a lot of waiting. I use a hairdryer to speed things up. You can too if you have one. Now that the first one is dry, we are going to paint another one, the same as we did for the first. Draw a line with the tip of your brush, then paint a gradation from dark to light, making this one a tiny bit darker than the one before. Be sure to leave enough space to do this 3 more times. Be sure you are always testing your paint on your spare paper to check the color and lightness before you paint. Again, if you need to add more water or paint, don't be afraid to get some on your brush. You can start light, and if it's not dark enough, add a tiny bit more paint. You can always make the paint darker by adding more. But be careful, because it's not easy to make the paint lighter. Now we'll paint the same thing 2 more times, getting darker each time. Just so you know, I speed up all of my videos to twice as fast, so it may look like I do things quickly, but I take my time. So take your time too. Always make sure to let your work dry before starting any more painting. The darkest part of the painting will be last, using the most paint and the least transparent, letting very little of the paper show through. After our last and darkest paint dries, we'll remove the tape, pulling sideways close to the table so we don't tear our art. By the time we're done, we'll have done 5 gradations going from just paper color, the most transparent, adding more paint each time until the last, which is the least transparent. Let's try another painting. Get fresh clear water because this time we'll use a different color and we don't want our previous color to mix with our new color. Every now and then you'll need to clean off your palette when you want to mix a different color. Here I've wet a paper towel and I've wiped it off. If you are careful when mixing your paint, then you shouldn't have to clean your palette very often. For my practice paper, I'm going to just use the back of the one I used before. For this piece of art, we are going to do the same thing we did for the last piece of art. We'll paint the lightest one first and let it dry, making sure to leave enough room for 3 more. Paint with the side of your brush to cover bigger areas. We are adding more paint each time to let less of the paper show through. You can add a bit more paint if you think any area needs to be darker. I like to practice over and over so I get a little better each time. Our tape has left us a nice border for our art. Let's clean our water again and use another color. We don't want our previous color to mix with our new color using dirty water. This time we'll use orange and curve shapes for our lines. You can use whatever shapes you want as long as you leave enough room to add all of your transparent gradations. When doing your paintings, you can use any shapes and colors. You can even use different colors on the same piece, going from most transparent to the least or lightest to darkest. When an object in our art is lighter, it looks farther away. When it is darker, it looks closer. Look at your art and see what you think. On the darkest step, we use glazing, painting a color over an already dry color to make it darker. The orange is such a light color. We use the glazing technique to get the darkest orange we can by painting multiple layers. Do a few and see what you can come up with. Remember to take your time and have fun.